Our final speaker is Robin Wall Kimmerer, SUNY Distinguished Teaching Professor in the Department of Environmental Biology and founding director of the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment at the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry in Syracuse. Dr. Kimmerer is a botanist specializing in moss and an enrolled member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. Her compelling vision for environmental stewardship and ecological restoration draws on her background both in Western science and in indigenous traditional ecological knowledge. Ecological restoration aims to repair, recreate, or speed the recovery of a disturbed ecosystem. Dr. Kimmerer teaches that ecological restoration alone is not sufficient to heal the broken relationship between land and an industrialized society that continues to degrade the environment. She blends wisdom from traditional ecological knowledge with science to delineate an approach to environmental sustainability founded on biocultural reciprocity. In collaboration with tribal partners, she leads an active research program in the ecology and restoration of plants of cultural significance to Native peoples. She works to provide environmental science education for Native students and to create new models for integration of Indigenous philosophy with scientific tools on behalf of land and culture. She asserts that repair of ecosystems contributes to cultural revitalization, while renewal of culture promotes restoration of ecological integrity. Dr. Kimmerer's original contributions were highlighted in 2022 when she was awarded a MacArthur Fellowship. Representing Class 6's section on Human Environmental Sciences, Dr. Kimmerer's talk is entitled P-Values and Cultural Values, Creating Symbiosis Among Indigenous and Western Knowledges for Ecological Restoration. Dr. Kimmerer.
Ani, bonjour. Shabadaske gish kokwene deshnakas. Bodwe wad me kwenda, megaze do dem minwa mako do dem. And it is our traditional protocol that we always introduce ourselves in our language. And I am a beginning student of our Potawatomi language. So I give you respectful greetings, tell you that I'm a member of the Bear Clan and of the Eagles of the Potawatomi people, and that my name is Shabadaske Gish Kokwe. I also want to express my gratitude for this incredible honor of being inducted into the Academy and speaking to you today. Congratulations to all of the inductees, and also for the unrecognized collective work of many who have come before and who have put a foot in the door so that we might all be here. I especially want to recognize my great delight in the induction this year of one of my heroes, Linda Tuhiwe Smith, and I'm so grateful that she too is being recognized for her truly trailblazing work. And I am trained as a plant ecologist. I'm interested especially in how plant communities respond to disturbances, both anthropogenic and natural. And of course, the insights from disturbance ecology leads us to thinking about how could those patterns and processes that we observe be used in healing landscapes after anthropogenic disturbance in particular, using the tools of restoration ecology. But you know, working in restoration ecology for long, you come quickly to the conclusion that it's not really just the land that's broken, it's our relationship to land that has been broken. And Western ecological sciences simply don't have the capacity to be engaged in research around restoration of ethical relationship, but traditional ecological knowledge is expansive enough to incorporate cultural values as well as p-values to guide us in that work of healing relationship to place as well. So my work in restoration is highly interdisciplinary, using frameworks from ethnobotany and traditional ecological knowledge to address issues around land justice. And thank you, Dr. Rick, for creating a beautiful on-ramp to the kinds of things that I think about. There's really been awesome continuity among all of these talks. I also want to say that I am dedicated to the art of science storytelling, as well as a really important piece in healing our relationship with the living world. And so I also want to introduce you to one of the organisms who has been my great teacher in a lot of my research. Linnaeus called this beautiful plant Hierocloe odorata. In my language, we call them wingashk. This is the plant known as sweetgrass. It's a traditionally cultural keystone species among many northeastern and Pacific Northwest peoples, and is traditionally braided in just the way that you see here. And this engagement with braiding sweetgrass is culturally understood as the hair of Mother Earth. And so we braid her hair as a sign of our regard. But in our contemporary setting, we can say, well, how do we demonstrate our regard for healing the planet? With one strand of Indigenous knowledge, with another strand of Western scientific knowledge, and of course the knowledge of the plants themselves, which both of our human knowledges are trying to ascertain. We were asked, of course, to talk a little bit about our journey into science. And so I want to start with a very formative moment at the beginning of my education as a plant ecologist that truthfully, when I think about this, it has shaped virtually everything that came afterwards as both a scientist, as an educator, and as a writer. And I was lucky enough to grow up outdoors with my parents, who were the first in their long lineage to go to college, but they were great naturalists and their knowledge of the land was deep. I grew up with Potawatomi cultural values about the natural world, and there was very little question for me of what path I would follow. I was born to be a botanist, although I will tell you that I also thought maybe I should be a poet, but I was quickly told that, you can't do both of those things. So I went off to a college of forestry to study botany, which is what was available to me. And I knew in the College of Forestry, I would be only one of very few women in the whole college, and I would certainly be the only Native person on campus. That was well over 50 years ago, but I want to tell you that situation has not changed a great deal. But I wanted to be prepared for this because it was both auspicious and intimidating to know what I would be walking into. So my preparation for this was that I bought a red plaid wool shirt. I thought that means that I would fit in nicely at a forestry school, and that's just what I was hoping for. But I also was preparing myself for what I knew would be my freshman interview. And indeed, when my botany professor said, "So, Miss Wall, why do you want to study botany?" I was ready. I'd always loved this combination of New England aster and goldenrod, and I had noticed the fact that they shared a habitat type, but they're clonal plants. They could grow in clones, but they don't. They grow intermingled with one another, making this gorgeous display. So as a budding plant ecologist, I thought that was my entree into studying plant ecology. And when he heard that, I said, I want to know why these plants look so beautiful together. In fact, I want to know why the whole world is beautiful and how do we keep it that way? And he looked at me over his glasses and he said, "Miss Wall, scientists do not concern themselves with beauty. If you want to study beauty, you should have gone to art school. That's not science. So drawing on my Potawatomi ethnobotany, I also said, well, I want to know why the plants make medicine for us. Thought maybe I'd be on more solid ground there. And he said, no, that's not science either. But tell you what, you come and take my classes, and then you'll learn something about plants. That's why I look so happy. This is my freshman photo taken literally that afternoon after that fateful interview. I'm glad you laughed because you could also cry. I had no vocabulary for resistance. He was the scientist, and I wanted to be a scientist. I thought I had made a mistake about what science was, and I understood in that moment that I was knocking on the door of a club that didn't necessarily want to let me in. But you know, I didn't think about it at the time, but I sure did later, how my first day of higher education was an echo of my grandfather's first day of higher education. When he was just 9 years old, he was taken from our reservation in Oklahoma and put on the train for the infamous Carlisle Indian School, where his way of knowing the questions that were on his minds, his indigenous science and land knowledge too, was to be replaced in the colonial enterprise of erase and replace. And I tell you this story of tremendous loss and of resilience because we are still here, and so is our knowledge. I tell you this story because in my experience and that of many of my colleagues and my students, the institutions of Western science continue to be deeply assimilative. And it is our responsibilities as leaders in the scientific community to fix that. Participation in science by Native peoples continues to be at a vanishingly small rate. And yet we've always been scientists, sustainability scientists. Thank you. We need ways to address the gatekeeping of knowledge and to broaden participation by diverse thinkers to do the science that we need, where p-values and cultural values intersect. I am so proud to tell you that right down the hall from where my professor said, that's not science, we today have the Center for Native Peoples and the Environment. And our entire goal is to bring together the wisdom of these two powerful intellectual traditions of Western scientific knowledge and traditional ecological knowledge for our shared concerns around sustainability. The metaphor that we use, among others, is this of two-eyed seeing, put forward by two Mi'kmaq scholars, to say that for most of our educations and most of our research introductions, we've only been taught to look at the world through the lens of Western science, right? How many of you were ever exposed to Indigenous science or Indigenous knowledge as a valued element in your work? 1, 2, 3. Oh, good. You see the story. Traditional knowledge gives us tools to think about why is the world so beautiful and how do we keep it that way. And in our research and teaching at the center, we value bringing together both of these ways, just as all of us as scientists are taught to value multiple streams of evidence and alternative hypotheses in our work. But for the most part, Indigenous knowledge has not been part of our experience. And indeed, Western science tried to erase those ways. And it's so gratifying to know that that is changing. Why does two-eyed seeing, why does Indigenous science matter so much? I could talk about that all afternoon. I won't, but I want to share just one example from the United Nations report on biodiversity. Just one example. This amazing document, which I'm guessing probably many of us have not read, and you don't want to because it would give you nightmares. This is the report that tells us about the insect apocalypse. This is the report that documents the mass extinctions of songbirds and other organisms, plunging levels of biodiversity around the world. But within this catastrophic decline, the report gives us reason for hope. And that is that there are places on the planet, oases of biodiversity thriving, and those oases are in homelands stewarded by Indigenous peoples. And shouldn't we in the scientific community be asking why and learning new approaches to safeguarding biodiversity from ancient sciences? When we look and try to say, why is this true? Why are there these places where biodiversity is thriving? The shorthand version is Indigenous science and land management, the application of traditional ecological knowledge, long-term monitoring and adaptive response to fluctuations in populations that are present within those communities, and the Indigenous worldview that says we are part of nature, that we can't be well unless the land is well. And so this synergy between ways of knowing translates to Indigenous cultural values that guide how we take from the land and manage the land. I find this map fascinating. It's a collaboration between linguists and biodiversity scientists. This map from Terra Lingua shows hot spots of biodiversity around the globe, and it maps onto it Indigenous language diversity. And we see a striking correlation between those places where Native peoples' cultures are thriving and biodiversity is thriving as well. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to be so fast there. And this stunning statistic that 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity, is in Indigenous homelands. And this growing body of work of recognizing the importance of traditional ecological knowledge in biodiversity and cultural diversity protection has led to something that I never dreamed I would see in my long career swimming upstream and trying to bring Indigenous knowledge into the attention of scientists, is the 2022 White House policy that mandates that traditional ecological knowledge be elevated in all federal land management decision-making and in research. So with this stunning development, what we also have to see is that the urgent question upon us is how do we create right relationship between these ways of knowing? And I see I'm already out of time, oh my goodness. But to say that when we look at the examples of Indigenous oases of biodiversity, we have to recognize that it's not enough just to conserve the remnants. We have to think about how we can heal from the habitat degradation that we have created. And this is our work in biocultural restoration. And briefly speaking, what we're trying to do is to think about ways in which restoration approaches and restoration science would be different if we approached it through the lens of the Indigenous worldview. And what we're trying to do is to advance the evolution of restoration science by the incorporation of multiple ways of knowing, of traditional ecological knowledge, to move beyond the original formulation for restoration, which was basically cover it up, make it go away, i.e. reclamation. Scientific ecological knowledge then brought us ecosystem restoration, to say we're going to repair the damage that we have inflicted. We're going to emulate natural biogeochemistry and biodiversity using scientific approaches. But what we're trying to do is to say when we add traditional ecological knowledge approaches, what more can be healed when we think about, again, this notion that it's not just the land that's broken, but our relationship to land as well. And so in this way, we're thinking about biocultural restoration, of using traditional ecological knowledge, using indigenous worldview to inform reference ecosystem targets, to inform the processes that we use to engage the land as a partner in restoration, not only as having an imposed engineering solution. And then this moves us to thinking about how do we restore a relationship with place. Because in the great promise of ecological restoration, many of them are scientific successes, but long-term failures in their landscape. So why is that? Because relationship to place has not been restored. And so we're working with our Indigenous partners to think about what does that mean to restore a caretaking relationship to place. How do we restore not only biodiversity, but local livelihoods? How do we restore ceremony? What role does that play in the longevity and the dynamism of restoration? Think about, you're probably all aware of the importance of cultural burning and how Western science has caught up to Indigenous science in terms of application of that element of disturbance ecology. This is a traditional tending practice. How can we, again, better heal the land by the engagement with these processes? But engagement for cultural burning or for tending or for any other sorts of harvesting practices requires access. Native peoples need to be able to have access to steward those lands in traditional ways. So this becomes a matter of restoring justice as well. And so our vision is one to move beyond biocultural restoration, of not only incorporating traditional knowledge and cultural values, toward reciprocal restoration, to think about the ways in which when we heal the land, when biodiversity is intact, what is the impact that that has on cultural revitalization? And what are the impacts of cultural revitalization, of having living language, ceremony, harvesting practices, when all of that is intact? What are the beneficial outcomes that we see for the land as well? To understand that when we are healing the land, we are healing ourselves. And we've all done this, so I'll just continue the thread. My last slide is to think about the ways in which the transformative potential of engaging Indigenous knowledge as a partner, a complementary sovereign partner to Western science, has extraordinary transformative potential in thinking about the questions that we ask. Who are our research partners? What does an Indigenous-led research agenda look like? And you're looking here at pages from the 2017 declaration, the Indigenous Science Declaration, that was crafted and signed by over 200 Indigenous scientists to ask from the scientific community recognition of the importance of multiple ways of knowing, and to become good allies and collaborators in incorporating these multiple ways of knowing for sustainability solutions. But we all recognize, and particularly I would say in the community of Indigenous scientists, that to become transformative, the notion of being constantly required to also conform. It's hard to transform if you must always conform. And so again, that appeal to all of us to be thinking about ways to decolonize the institutions of Western science to allow the flourishing of multiple ways of knowing. Thank you for listening.
Hold on. Any quick questions? Or even moderately quick questions? I've clearly intimidated you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. I want to ask everyone to do a round of applause to thank all of our speakers again. Thank you all for coming, and This is the close of our 2024 research briefings. Tremendous talks.